بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. And welcome back to Islamic Oasis Live. It has been a while since Ramadan, and there's, of course, a lot going on, brothers and sisters, in both in the world and right here in our backyard, all over the United States. Of course, today's discussion, dear brothers and sisters, is regarding what's happening on campuses. As you know, campuses, many Ivy League schools, top colleges, there's demonstrations going on, protests going on, encampments going on, and then there's been a brutal response to this on campuses. Police being brought in, thugs, as we saw in UCLA, being brought in and basically, trying to get students out of or stopping them from doing these protests, calling on the Israeli government or the universities to divest and things like this. There's a lot going on. So to discuss all of this, we have one of the brothers, Sadik Froukh. He was one of the speakers last Sunday at the Northwestern University protest. I heard a lot about it, and I was trying to see if we can get the brother on to speak about the talk itself, because I know in our side of town we actually heard a lot about the talk. I was getting calls saying, "Do you know who this brother is?" It was actually a very interesting discussion. So let's bring in our brother Sadik. Brother Sadik, welcome to Islamic Oasis Live, Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Brother Sadik, let's start this. First of all, your speech at the protest, what was the... well, there's a lot of background here. Okay. Did you see, what was the response to your speech when you were giving at Northwestern? And I mean, if you can just kind of describe what was happening at Northwestern, and then your speech there, and kind of, I'm sure that you were given feedback regarding your speech also on campus. So let's start there. Go ahead, Sheikh.
Yes, inshallah. So firstly, regarding the environment at Northwestern and what was it like when we first entered, like you said, I mean, it's an encampment going on at Northwestern like other universities. So students are just gathered and they will not move. So they're not sanctioned by the university. It's not allowed. It's not legal to do this. And these are private universities like Northwestern. So they have series of events. They have schedules. They have protests, so on and so forth. And the interesting thing is that the message that I gave at Northwestern was not the message that people expected or they have been hearing at these protests or at these campuses or encampments overall within the U.S. So essentially, we wanted to get a message out. And that message is that by doing these protests, by doing these encampments, these large movements that are a chain reaction, not just across the U.S., but are actually extending around the world the past couple of days, is that we can't continue to rely on the system and the box in which we live in to try and solve the problem. Because this idea came about as we were hearing, okay, what are they calling for in these encampments? What's their goals? What's their objective? What are their speeches about? And it's all about, as you know, they're calling for diverse. So defunding, stop supporting the genocide in Gaza. These universities should stop funding for Israeli cause, so on and so forth. And we realized that, listen, all these things that you're calling for, I mean, you understand the system that you're living under. You understand you live in democracy. You understand what barriers you have and how far along you can get within that system. So our message was that day that we need to actually abandon democracy itself. We need to stop calling for democracy. We don't need to divest. We don't need to defund. We need to abandon this whole entire system because we're never going to get anything out of it, whether it's protests at universities or outside of these universities.
Is this message to the students? I mean, because I know, look, I mean, I was talking about this with some of the students. One said that, look, they were successful in South Africa days when there was apartheid going on, that there were universities that were forced to divest in South Africa, for instance. It took a lot of time, but they were able to get something out of that. But most of the students there, are they Muslim? Are they, Muslims meaning from Palestine, or Muslims in general, or are they mixed bag? And do they understand the message that you are saying, that look, it's not just about divesting, you're talking about a system that by design supports such crimes across the world?
So it depends on university to university. So in Chicago, I've been to Northwestern, University of Chicago, and DePaul, and every single one of these differs drastically in their speeches. The people that attend there, where they are from. When it came to Northwestern, it was barely any Muslims. Like hard to find Muslims there. Like small groups here and there.
I was there for a day, and I was shocked to see it's not barely anybody there. I think there were like 5 people praying.
Yep, barely any Muslims at Northwestern. This could be because of the organization, whoever organized it, the amount of Muslims on campus. But regardless, when it came to Northwestern, because that's where we gave the talk, no Muslims, very little Muslims. So our talk was directly expressed towards Muslims. The response that we had from the people that we talked to is it's 100% agreed. We need to forget about democracy. Islam is a way of life. But it always comes down to this one thing. And I understand the reason behind it, is they always say, but we have to focus on what's going on now. We have Gaza going on now. We have killing. We have murder. We have genocide. We have to stop it. So this should be our focus right now. They split this issue as if focusing on abandoning the system and implementing Islam as a way of life. They secularize it as it's not a solution for Gaza currently. No, what I should be calling for is looking at the assassin, looking at the murderer, and telling him to stop his killing. Those that are supporting it, tell him to stop. And this is the whole entire basis of secularism. And the reason why that's their call, whether at Northwestern or U Chicago or DePaul, is because the organizations that are organizing these encampments are secular organizations. They're not Muslim organizations. They're not Muslim-based organizations. You have people amongst these organizations from so many different backgrounds. And I could give you perfect examples from my time at UIC, SJP, Students of Justice for Palestine. I mean, you have people from the LGBTQ community. You have a bunch of different activists, whether it's feminists or any other activists on campus. You have Muslims, non-Muslims, Palestinians, non-Palestinians, so a whole entire mixture. So when you mix all these people into one organization and you bring them for one reason, one goal, and one objective, of course, your message is not going to be abandoning democracy. It's not going to be Islam is the true solution, and it is true the method in which we should be helping and supporting the people of Gaza.
Sheikh, but so what happens now? I mean, these campuses, of course, now, even with the call for democracy, meaning that these guys, I mean, obviously are calling for democracy or think democracy is a solution. But then you have such a brutal put down of these protests or these, encampments. I mean, you look at what's happening in UCLA, what's happening in, I get in Colombia and things like that. So what impact has, the police brutality, I guess, has had on these protests? What do you think? Where do you think it's going to go? You're looking at close to 2,200 some arrests across the country. And so, what does the summer look like? I mean, what are you thinking? I mean, look, we went through Black Lives Matter movements, and and then we saw all of those. At least I was able to attend one of their protests, and I saw what happens in those protests. Where is this going, Akhi? Where will this end? Or if this will this end, or are you looking at a long-term situation of the students doing this type of activism on campuses?
So I think the first thing is to address before even answering this question, there's something else that we have to address when it comes to these encampments and what they're calling for and what it takes for them to stop. Because it's going to go either two ways. The way it's going right now is it's expanding. It's catching more heat. More people are joining in. Even day to day, when you go to these universities, the numbers get larger and larger. So people aren't getting more tired. Rather, you have more traction coming to this. And as we've seen, I mean, now it's spreading. You have encampments in Paris. You have encampments in Australia. You have encampments in all over the U.S. So from where it's going right now is that it's increasing. But the important message that I want to get across is that I believe that the situation in which, or the people that are organizing these encampments, they're missing one key issue when it comes to the idea of free speech. The idea is that, okay, within the American capitalist democratic system, you have this given right to all citizens that they have a freedom of speech within the Bill of Rights. You have the freedom to express yourself, to express your religion, to express your thoughts, whether politically or in any other aspect. But what happens when you have two ideas that are colliding? Two people are trying to express their thoughts and express their right for freedom of speech, and they're colliding. One of them has to prevail over the other. They cannot coexist together. And this is what we're seeing at these universities when you have the police getting involved. And this is something that is kind of imaginary to think in America police would get involved in this manner with students on private universities, Ivy League schools, arresting professors. It's not something that people would imagine in America.
Thugs, it seems like in Colombia, thugs were brought in, man, from outside. Either Colombia or UCLA, I forgot. But, I mean, literally, you could tell that some of them were not even Jews, it looks like. They were just bought in. It looks like even paid. And not only that, police was kind of told to stay out of this for almost 2 hours and basically let them go at it.
Yep. Because that's essentially the idea of one idea has to prevail. You were living in a capitalist system. So if this freedom of speech or whatever you're expressing goes against our benefit or our influence or whatever we could gain out of it, of course we need to shut it down. Now, how are they going to shut it down in this instance? As a person that's not part of the organizers, I can't imagine how a privately funded university, an Ivy League school, is expected to divest and defund the idea of Israel. I mean, you're talking about an Ivy League school within a capitalist democratic system in America that is the reason why the occupation in Gaza exists. How can you have these schools defund and divest from this issue? That's from a perspective, not talking as from our solution or what our solution to be as Muslims, but even for the people organizing there, what are you thinking you're going to get out of these encampments or out of these protests? Because obviously this is a negative impact on not just the universities, it's a negative impact on the elections that are going to come up soon.
I mean, they can say it's public opinion. We are trying to push the public opinion to at least... I mean, look, there has been a lot of... let's say from the public opinion perspective, there has been something good out, meaning I don't think Netanyahu had to come out and say that, look, what's happening at the universities, this is unbelievable, this is anti-Semitism, this and that. I don't know if you heard Biden yesterday came out and openly said this must stop, and this is, if it's, this could cause lawlessness and we're not going to accept that, and this has to stop, and we will stop it if it comes down to, if it's criminal, if we see that this is becoming a criminal activity and things like that. So obviously it is bringing in, obviously, the politicians to come and comment on that, whether it's governors of these states, presidents of the universities. So if the goal was to try to create a public opinion against Israel, do you think they've achieved that at least?
100%. I mean, even prior to these encampments, public opinion on what's going on in Gaza and the whole entire if you want to talk just in America, their stance on what's going on and Israel's reactions and how they've been carrying out things throughout the war, the public opinion has already been there. But what the encampment did, in my opinion, is that it physically embodied this public opinion into an actual movement that
Mm,
could be measured, that could be expressed. Because beforehand, you have protests, but when it comes to these encampments, as you said, there's a difference between the protests that were going on Michigan Avenue that have 100,000 people. So it's not the numbers. It's not the numbers that scared them 100,000 people on Michigan Avenue. It's the fact that uh, the idea that students are unlawfully being gathered on a private campus, and they are not willing to move, and they are willing to take any extent. That means sacrifice their career. That means sacrifice going to jail. And this is an important point to the. I mean, even when it comes to the non-Muslims, the organizers that I've talked to, they said when we're organizing these encampments, we understand that us as the organizers, we're, if any counter protests occur or any police intervention occurs, we're on the front line. That means if we're a part of this university, that's 100% suspension. After that, that's going to be permanently on your record. You will be doxxed or so on and so forth. So it will be almost impossible to find a career if it doesn't even get to the point of arrest. So this persistence and these actions and these movements on university campuses is different than the protest. So that's why I think it has achieved the embodiment of this public opinion differently than how the protests have been going. And I just want to point out a point. So not to belittle what's going on at these encampments and the effect that they have done, but the reason why I bring up the idea of democracy and abandoning democracy and what will this encampment eventually do for the people in Gaza is because whenever we go to these encampments, we're trying to send a message to the Muslims there. And the message is as follows, that if we just gather for the sake of gathering and we just chant and we're just sitting here sacrificing our careers just for the university to send one email, and that's what they want. They want the university to send one email saying we condemn Israel after the October 7 attacks, and we want them to divest from their support. And not all universities are calling for divesting materially, so defunding. At DePaul, that's not what they were calling. They just want them to condemn with one email. So the message you want to get to Muslims is that you do have an effect. Look at the amount of people that you've been able to gather. But if you just gather people for the sake of gathering and you're making a movement with no objective or no goal or no idea how to reach it, it's never going to reach anywhere. So
mm,
imagine if these encampments were held by Muslims, by Muslim institutions, by Muslim organizations, and the message was delivered Islamically, from an Islamic perspective. Imagine the effects of this movement that could have on the world. Because when someone comes and talks about the idea of democracy or abandoning democracy, everyone's going to have eyes on him, as it happened to us at these universities, and they don't want you to talk about it. To the extent where the organizers themselves, Muslim and non-Muslim, they will tell you this is not what we're gathered here for. We don't want to talk about Islam and Islam as a solution and abandoning democracy. That's going too far. All we want is just for them to defund and divest. So this is why I bring up this idea of having a goal and objective in mind to try and actually get something materially achieved out of these encampments. And again, not to belittle the effect that these encampments have had.
So, in your discussions with the organizers, I mean, this is something that's very clear in their mind, that they're not talking about serious discussion on what should happen to the state of Israel. It's just a discussion on, okay, defund, don't support, send us an email saying that you want to condemn. That's it.
That's exactly what they're calling for. And that's the Muslims. When if it came from a non-Muslim, I would understand. This is his country, this is his system, this is his president. And from, as they say, a humanitarian perspective, it's his innate disposition. It's his instinct that's pushing him with these emotions to go and do something about what is happening. But that's what he does within his own system. I'm not an American. I'm not part of the system. I don't say that Biden is my president or these are my representatives. I have my own system from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that means my actions shouldn't be based off of it. And to the extent of how much are these Muslim organizers not wanting to talk about it, to the point where when we set up a big poster to talk about having these discussions with Muslims and non-Muslims proposing an actual solution, they kick you out. and they have done it at 2 universities already. They will say,
Mm.
"We don't want you part of the encampment. This is
Mm.
not our goal. This is not our objective."
So I remember when I attended one. I think it was a funeral of the kid that was killed by one of the Jews. Do you remember when this whole thing started in October 7th? When the thing. So I was at the funeral, and I was speaking. I remember organizers actually telling me not to speak on any real issues. It was just, this is wrong, this is a crime, and that's it, and nothing more. So I understand where you're coming from, but let me ask you. Let's see, from political analysis issue, Sheikh. The protests, they kind of started all of a sudden, across all universities. Many of the slogans are the same. Many of the tactics are the same. Uh, Again, this could be. This is just something to throw out there to think. I'm just thinking out loud with you here. Do you think that the protests are being allowed to happen because this could affect the strategic uh, push of United States for a two-state solution in 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 Palestine, or for Palestine?
And that's a pretty big thought, but initially, when it first started, a lot of us did have this idea that maybe the U.S. is allowing this. Maybe this is something that they want. They're allowing. They're giving room for people to do, to express themselves, so tension doesn't build up within the people. But I don't have an exact answer for you. But also thinking out loud, when you're talking about the events that are taking place at Columbia or UCLA or at Austin in Texas, these are large universities and other universities as well in the U.S. And some
Oh,
of them, like you said, are Ivy League. So is it to the extent where
I mean, look, it
it
happened
will
in the
bring?
past. Meaning, the thing is, it's creating a public opinion in the country itself, that, meaning in the U.S., uh, that could also put pressure on the state of Israel, that they may be losing the public opinion here. I mean, look, at the end of the day, no matter what, majority of the U.S. public is still with Israel. This is, if you look at any of the
Minority.
polls that are coming out, they're still with the government of Israel. They believe in Israel and all of that stuff. So yes, there has been a lot more. It has, obviously, the pictures, the videos that has come out. But I guess, just to go back to, do do you think that this is to create maybe a certain type of public opinion within the West, to pressure Israel, or you're still not, you don't think it is?
No, I think it's a genuine movement by students,
Mm.
not in an organized fashion. And the reason why I believe that is because of the actions that you're talking about, the extent to which America is going, of brutality. I mean,
But
arresting
that has
people
happened also in the
on
past, akhi. I
campuses.
mean, okay, fine, but this has happened in the past. The U.S. government, there's always instigators. There's always those people who are, they know how far they will allow these things to go, and at the same time, they create these things. It's just that I'm looking at uh, the universities, and I'm looking at the slogans. I'm looking at the organizers. I was at Northwestern, I guess, just a few hours before you, an hour actually, while you were speaking, while we were coming there. And then I got to see some of the students and things like that. But it seemed very, not, I don't want to say it wasn't staged, but you could tell that the students are being prepared somewhere to, the organizers are being prepared somewhere. What do we know about these guys that organize these things? I mean, I know they're socialist. Many of them are socialist, leftist. Did you get any sense of that?
I did try to get in touch with as many organizers as I can, and I did get in touch with one of them that was at Northwestern, and that
Mm.
was also trying to do the one at Urbana-Champaign as well. Again, to the point of who are these organizers, where do they come from, what's their background? Especially the SJP or the coalition in Chicago, they're all, as I said again, it's a secular movement, a secular organization. They're just, as they call themselves, pro-Palestinian activists that wherever they are, they try to use slogans, they try to use chants, protests, nonviolent. as they describe it, to achieve their goal and objective. So that's their background. But by the way, you will find as well at these encampments, you will find people like you said. You will find these socialist communist groups and these socialist communist people. You will find all these minorities, and the reason why I believe that these minorities all gather is because they are minorities. They have no issue to adopt, so they adopt everybody's issue. Same thing with the LGBTQ people that come and join. Why are they coming and joining these protests? Why are they part of this coalition to begin with? It's because they have no issue. They have no issue to adopt. They see everybody as a minority that they need to adopt these issues with them. Unlike the Muslim himself, it's whether he likes it or not, the issue of Palestine is his issue. As long as he declares La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, it becomes his issue whether he likes it or not. So you find the mixture of these people there.
Sheikh, the other thing is that, I was listening to one of the students speaking at UCLA, and she seems like she was from Palestine. She was saying, when they were asking that, look, you guys are speaking against Biden, what's the alternative is Trump. So do you want Trump to come into power? And she said something like, well, I didn't say that either, and that both of them are, they're just two sides of of the same coin. Did you sense that at all? Are you, when you're going to these these protests, when you're talking to students with so many different universities, did you get the sense that people are losing hope in the system? They don't think anything is possible with this? I mean, what happens if Trump comes into power, or will it make any difference as far as what's happening in the Middle East, in the Muslim world?
This may be a pessimistic answer, but from all the interactions that I've had and my personal interactions with these groups at UIC and the past week that we spent at these events and these encampments, there is actually more sense of losing hope in the system with the non-Muslims that we talk to more than the Muslims themselves, unfortunately. You can't believe the conversations that we have had with the non-Muslims themselves. They are convinced in this idea, and they are more curious about understanding what an alternative solution is than the Muslims have. The Muslims are not interested in hearing an alternative solution, but the non-Muslims, they are interested in hearing something else. They want to hear something other than democracy, this fake face of democracy and this fake face of freedom of expression that eventually failed them. So unfortunately, I don't see, and I can't talk generally about all these organizations or these people, but from what I witnessed, there's not any progress in people's understanding and people's awareness on this issue.
But within the non-Muslims, you do hear that, okay, no, there needs to be an alternative.
Non-Muslims are very curious to hear what you have as an alternative. Because again, this is all he knows. He doesn't know anything other than the system in which he lives under, except for the very few intellectual thinkers out there, which is a very, very small minority. They know nothing other than democracy. So when you come and propose a new ideology, a new way of life, and you try to create a reality in his head as to what this way of life means, I will tell you their reactions are incredible. It's much more than you'd think. They are interested in hearing the solution. They're sick of democracy. They're sick of fake freedom of expression and freedom of speech and this whole entire capitalist system, and they want something else. So that's something different that we have got. I have not yet had an interaction with a non-Muslim that rejected this whole entire solution that you're throwing at him. He's like, this is actually a very valid solution to give.
Meaning Islam, or what are we saying here as far as, of course, Islam, or you're talking about the getting rid of Israel as a state?
Not exactly Islam as an ideology, but the idea of looking for something other than democracy. This is where they're thinking. Because they've tried. I mean, if anybody has tried democracy, and they have done trial and error with it, and they have lived under it, and they understand it, it's going to be the people in this country. So they are sick and tired of it. But unfortunately, the Muslims themselves in this country, yet they still have hope in the system. But again, this small minority of the non-Muslims, of the Americans that are coming to these protests and these encampments, again, it's not your average middle-class American that lives the American dream and is conservative. No, they're all liberal. They're all liberal Americans. They're all activists. They're all of this type of nature.
I mean,
So
they're
it's
actual
important to
students, and they're
understand who
also
they are.
they're students from the universities, or are there outsiders also involved?
Outsiders are also involved.
So how they're just coming to the campus? They're just there, and which is that legal thing or is that illegal? They don't care. They're just there. They're coming. They're just joining with the activists.
Well, the whole encampment is technically illegal,
Right.
but the doors are open because the university, as long as you're not in buildings, I mean, the university is open, physically open for anybody to come in. So as long as they don't want to cause more tension and more problems on these campuses, forcibly stopping non-students from entering the campus, I mean, it's going to be a mess. So it's anybody is welcome, anybody is open to come. Because if they're illegally being encamped here, then how are you going to stop me from entering this campus? It creates a huge problem.
Sheikh, a lot of people are questioning, that there's so many non-Muslims, students especially, standing up and saying what they're saying, even at the cost of suspension and maybe losing their jobs, future, things like this. But that we don't see the same kind of activism happening in the Muslim world or the campuses in the Muslim world. Why do you think that is, Sheikh? That we don't see the same kind of movements happening across the Muslim world in the universities, especially by students?
Unfortunately, that's the case. That all this is happening and has started and it's expanding, not in the Muslim world. But I feel like a big part of it is the system in which they live under, and the trial and error that they have had with these things. I mean, you're talking about oppressive systems, oppressive regimes. Whatever is happening in America will happen 100 times harder in the countries back home. And they've had trial and error, like we said. They've had the Arab Spring before, and they've seen the backlash that it's had. And even during the past 6 months, I mean, you had large movements in the Muslim world, but nothing that had an effect to the extent of what's going on in America. I believe it may be the nature of they may have lost hope in the idea that we could actually change with these movements, with these actions, because like we said, they've sacrificed everything, and they've sacrificed so much, and they put everything on the line during the Arab Spring, and the result was not what they expected. The same exact person came, just a different face to the same exact regime, and it was the same exact lifestyle, same exact oppression, same exact system, and nothing changed in that. So there may be a sense that there's no point in doing these actions because we will not get any change. But the interesting point is that even when you look at, for example, Jordan, the massive protests that happened at the end of Ramadan, the last 10 days of Ramadan, and so on, a couple of days after Ramadan that it lasted, this is all organized. The people that are out on the streets, they're all the youth. They're all the students that we're talking about here. They're the ones that organize it. They're the ones that are calling these chants that you don't normally hear in Jordan. Nobody ever calls against the king. Nobody ever calls against or swears against him. Yet you still saw during this time of tension, they had nothing to lose. They didn't care about all these things, and they were persistent. The police would come they would say it ends at midnight, at 12 p.m., and they would forcibly stay. Although there was beatings and there was arrests and there was tear gas thrown, they would stay all the way till Fajr, and they continued, and they were persistent. So the same exact idea of persistence and sacrifice that we're seeing here, we also saw in some instances in the Muslim world, even if it wasn't embodied in the same exact movement.
SubhanAllah. It's not. I mean, if you're not seeing that in Turkey, we're not seeing. I mean, Jordan, I still understand. There's a lot of the Palestinians there. It seems like their families are obviously there. I think 70% of the population of Jordan is Palestinian in many ways. And if you didn't see that kind of push in Masr and other places or Egypt, I guess yes, it does matter. I mean, I guess the reaction of the governments would be brutal compared to what's happening here. But Sheikh Khani, so what happens next on these campuses? What do you think the role of the Muslim youth in general? What do you think is happening, Sheikh? This thing could, let's say, if Netanyahu thinks that he's going to go into Rafah. I mean, he said that whether there is a deal or no deal, he's going into Rafah. I mean, it seems like they've already even established a date and things like that. Then what happens in the West, as far as the Muslim youth or the Muslim or these movements, do you think they could turn into something else? Is there, usually governments look into radicalization and they start looking into entrapments, all kinds of stuff that starts happening, especially because, this is universities and this is where people go to think, and a lot can happen from there. So, what do you expect, Sheikh? Next 6 months, next year, what's your thinking on this whole issue? And as also, just to add to that, what do you think Muslims should do to address this situation?
As long as there's no guidance, as long as there's Muslims not leading this effort, when it comes to us Muslims in the West, we are not going to come out with a proper result, a result that we could actually use in the future, that we could build off of. As long as the ones that are running these events and these movements and these protests are these secular organizations, we're not going to get much out of it. Whether through the how aware we're going to be, our level of awareness, our level of action, our objectives we understand, it's, in my opinion, from what I have seen on the ground, it will not change as long as the people who are leading it
But
are
you're
not going to
asking the
be
Muslim. So, are you asking Muslim organizations, movements, to go and join the encampments?
Muslim institutions like such as masajid,
I mean,
like
masajid
institutions.
or movements, or are you asking
I
those
think it
people
should
to
be
go
by
and?
default.
Are you?
I think it should be by default. If you have these groups and non-Muslim majorities going to the streets and going to these campuses, I think it should be by default. Again, this is our issue. This is your
So,
issue. This is connected to your aqidah. You should be out there. You shouldn't let them are the ones that are leading this effort. You should be leading the effort to begin with. And unfortunately, yet we
no,
have
hold
not
on. Let me
seen
get
a
this
big
right.
response.
Let me, because I think there's a lot of, before the show happened, there's a lot of youth were calling me, texting me, saying, who's this brother, this, that, and the other, and they were asking a lot of questions. I said, just watch the show. Let's see what the brother has to say. A lot. I mean, because I guess today the University of Chicago is going crazy again, and I think there's police there and all that. So
Yep.
youth were calling me and saying, should we join these encampments and things like that? So I said, look, listen to what these young brothers who are there on campus, who are on the ground, listen to them and see what you have to say, or at least make your decisions then. But you are saying that you wish that the masajid would join these efforts. Encampments, I mean, literally going, setting up tents and saying, what, just to defund, or say, obviously, that what do you expect the masajid to do?
When it comes to the idea of Zim encampment specifically, the whole entire idea does not work for us as Muslims. Because when are we going to leave? When is our goal going to be achieved? Our goal is not achieved when these universities defund, or they divest, or they write an email and say we condemn Israel for any events that have happened, or any war crimes. This is not our goal and objective. We could care less if these universities or these Zionists have sent this email and they have condemned. So the idea of these encampments, I don't think there would be the biggest. This is where all our effort should lie. But since these encampments already exist and someone has already set them up, we as Muslims, if we were not part and that we were the ones leading this movement, you should at least be the ones there, and that's changing the whole entire outcome of this movement. You already have hundreds and thousands of people gathering at these universities, and they're students, and they're ready to take action, and they're ready to sacrifice, and they're in a state where they're not yet. They could like absorb this idea and this solution, and they can actually act upon it. So this is prime area and prime time for these Muslims and masajid and influential people within communities to actually take action and start leading this effort. So I don't mean by the masajid getting involved, meaning they go to these universities and set up tents. That's not what's asked for. And again, that does not align with our objective. And when are we going to leave? When are we going to leave? But I think our role as Muslims, we should definitely be at these encampments. We should actually take advantage of these encampments and give people what they actually want. We should actually have discourse, and we should actually have conversations and try to guide people's thoughts. Because again, and I told this to the organizers themselves at these encampments, I said, you have hundreds of people gathering. What are you giving them? What benefit are you giving them? Where are you going with this? Once they send an email, everybody's going to go home. What did you achieve? And he's like, well, that's currently what we want. If that is done, then We as Muslims in America are Palestinian activists, then we have achieved our goal. What about the tens of thousands that are murdered in Gaza? What if and the reason why I say the Muslims need to be involved, if the children in Gaza or the men and women in Gaza, they're looking at these encampments and these videos and they understand the reality, not just seeing videos and people standing up for them. They see who's coming to these encampments. Queers holding up signs saying queers for freedom, and you have random people, and you have feminists, and you have even Zionists that are coming to these encampments and fighting and whatnot, and random people that do not pertain to us, that do not pertain to our ideology or our lifestyle, that actually are not accepted and are condemned. They're the people that are coming and standing up. So how should we look as the larger Muslim community with over 1 million people within this community that are not being involved or trying to lead these movements?
So, give me practical steps. How would you lead them? I mean, obviously, there's a thought process. We have to have some type of process to. I understand that, but because look, I'll tell you, I went there, and this is the. But I almost felt as an outsider. Meaning, I didn't even know where to begin in what I was observing. I mean, with what you observe there, with what's happening, and of course, yes, you have to have some ways to break the ice and start conversations. That I understand, but I was trying to observe. What suggestions do you have? What ideas do you have that, let's say, Muslim leadership should do when they go there? And I did see some of the scholars or imams. They went there and they were speaking and things like this, but their message is the same thing, which is basically a non-message. Just they're being, you guys are brave students and things like this, and then you guys are getting, you guys are doing these things, but not a real solution that they could actually give as Muslims to the world. But give me some practical steps. What should Muslim leadership actually do at these encampments? Is it just go join them, or is it a specific dawah objectives that we should have?
We do not want to go and join just for the sake of joining. And even when you go there, I would not consider myself joining this encampment, joining this organization. What you need to go there is go and take advantage of, number one, the people that are there. How are you going to take advantage? You have to give them practical steps for them to take. You have to give them practical steps for change. And you have to, first of all, you have to cultivate his knowledge and his information. He needs to be politically aware. Hold speeches, distribute flyers, hold booths. And people are attracted to this 100%. This is successful. And we're talking about on the ground work that has been successful. You need to give people what they're actually looking for. They're looking for practical steps. And I guarantee you the majority of the Muslims in the community, the reason why they go to these protests and they go to these encampments and they follow these secular groups is because they don't see anybody else on the playing field, on the ground, that's actually providing something. And this is what people at university, even last semester when I was in university, I would say. He's like, I hate this whole entire idea, and I hate the organizers and the idea of secular solutions and the people that are here, but nobody else is offering something. So you, as the leader of the community, as an influential person, whatnot, don't give the same message that SJP and these coalitions are giving. Give people practical steps. Go there and set up booths and set up tables. Bring your own microphone. Try to speak with the organizers so you can get time to give speeches and talks. And it needs to be direct. It needs to be focused on first of all, what the initial problem is, because people don't understand the initial problem. They need to have political understanding. What the reason for the occupation of Gaza is, what is the political problem, who is behind it, and how the true solution should be, and give them practical steps. What should I do moving forward?
Allah Sheikh, Jazakallah khair, because it is Maghrib time now. We'll end it here. But Sadik, we have to get you back on. Is there any other plans? Have you been? I just wanted to. Did they call you back? How does this get organized? People that you know within the community called you up, or how does this work?
You mean in regarding giving the talk?
Yes.
Oh, that was not sanctioned by the group whatsoever. We just showed up and created our own spotlight in our own environment, whether they liked it or not.
Oh, subhanallah. Okay, so that's an idea itself that I guess people are allowed to. Well, but they did allow you to speak. They didn't have an issue you speaking. Well, I guess they had an issue after you spoke.
Yes, at other universities they had an issue after we spoke. And I'm sorry, just so the viewers don't get confused by this, one important thing when I'm saying that these organizers and the idea of this awareness amongst the Muslims has not been increasing or progressing, this is when it comes to the organizations. But the Muslims themselves, they will accept and they're willing to accept this idea and these practical steps in the solution that you're giving them. So don't just look at these secular or organizers and organizations and say there's no hope. There's hope within the people that are coming. There's hope within the students that are there. There's hope within the people in the community that you're interacting with. And that's where the focus should be.
All right, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts, akhi, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bring the solution that is really needed. I mean, we are on an all-out attack is being planned on now the Muslims of Rafah. Only Allah knows what we're going to see in the coming days, and it's high time that the Muslims realize what needs to be done and the kind of discussions that need to happen and what kind of the call to the Muslims around the world, the armies of the Muslims who are watching all of this happen, a whole genocide occurring in front of their screens, and everybody's watching the show. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and guide them what needs to be done in order to protect our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Jazakallah khair, akhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and your family and continue to use you for His sake. Ameen. Allahumma ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر